My dad slammed his fist on the table so hard the plates jumped. Then, in one explosive motion, he grabbed his dinner plate and hurled it against the kitchen wall. The ceramic shattered like a firework, spraying food and shards across the floor. My mother gasped. My sister just stared at me, like I had spat in her face. And all I had said was, "No, I'm not paying for her lawsuit." You could hear the silence swallowing the room. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I had spent years shrinking in that kitchen, letting the weight of my family's expectations crush me. But not tonight. "She's your sister!" my dad roared, pointing a trembling finger at me like I had betrayed the whole bloodline. "She's in trouble, and family helps family." Funny how that principle only applies when I'm the one expected to sacrifice. My sister, Lauren, stood there with perfectly curled hair, her designer bag still on her shoulder. She hadn't said a word since she walked in with the news. News I didn't even get from her, but from a cousin who saw it on Facebook. She was being sued for embezzlement from the company she worked at. A company owned by her best friend's parents. Somehow, now that the damage had surfaced, she came crawling back home. And suddenly I was supposed to fix it. "I didn't take that money!" Lauren finally snapped, her voice sharp like broken glass. "They're just twisting things because they're jealous of me. You know I would never do that." Dad nodded immediately. Of course, sweetheart. You don't have to explain yourself to him." And then he looked at me like I was filth. "But you, if you had an ounce of decency, you'd help your sister." I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I had once believed those words, decency, loyalty, family, meant something here. I used to buy into the idea that keeping quiet made me good. That giving up my peace, my money, my time, was what love looked like. But this wasn't love. This was control wrapped in guilt. So I stood up slowly, placed my napkin beside my untouched plate, and looked at each one of them. "I'm not her ATM," I said. "And I'm not cleaning up her mess." And for the first time in years, I walked out before anyone could stop me. They didn't just want my help. They expected my sacrifice. Lauren was always the golden child. That wasn't just my perception, it was a family fact, a gravitational pull that bent every conversation, every holiday, every family decision around her. I used to believe it was because she was the firstborn. That she had more charm, more confidence, more sparkle in her voice. But as we grew, I realized it wasn't just who she was. It was who they decided she was allowed to be. And who I was expected to be in contrast. From an early age I understood the script. Lauren was the star. I was the understudy, the stagehand, the kid who made sure everything backstage didn't fall apart. She got away with everything, missed curfews, failed tests, tantrums at Christmas, and my parents either laughed it off or defended her with some excuse about how sensitive she was. I remember one Thanksgiving when she called my grandmother a crusty old witch, because she didn't like the cranberry sauce. My mom scolded me later for not defending her when Grandpa snapped at her. That was the beginning of the quiet contract. Lauren created the chaos, I absorbed the aftermath. By high school, I stopped trying to compete. While Lauren bounced from cheerleading to theater to student council, leading drama in every hallway, I stuck to the library and part-time jobs. I worked hard. Not for praise, but for escape. My parents noticed, sure. They said I was low maintenance, easy. What they meant was forgettable until needed. The pattern continued into adulthood. Lauren flamed out of college after 2 semesters, blaming toxic professors for her bad grades. She took a gap year that became a gap life, jumping from one trendy dream to the next. First, she was going to launch a fashion line. Then it was becoming a YouTuber. Then she pivoted to luxury real estate. She even posted a selfie in front of a mansion she said she was closing on, but had just been visiting as a guest. My parents funded every leap. When one business crashed, the next was treated as a fresh start. "She's just figuring things out," my dad would say, usually while writing another check. Meanwhile, I got my degree quietly. Took internships no one asked me about. Moved out at 22 and never asked for a dime. I built my savings slowly. I drove a used Honda and learned how to meal prep on Sundays. While Lauren threw birthday parties with open bars, I calculated interest rates and debt-to-income ratios. Not once did I get a call saying, "We're proud of you." What I got was silence, until they needed something. When Mom needed help with a medical bill, I paid. When Dad's insurance policy lapsed, I fronted it. No thank yous, no acknowledgements. Just the assumption, of course I would help. That's who I was. I don't know when I started to feel it, the bitterness. Maybe the day Lauren posted a video ranting about how her fake friends had abandoned her over something so stupid, and I realized she was talking about stealing from a shared account. Or maybe it was when my dad yelled at me for not coming home for Lauren's birthday dinner, even though it was the same day I had a huge presentation at work. It's just a job, he said. Family comes first. But only when they need something. Then came the lawsuit. I found out the same way half the family did, on Facebook. A cousin tagged me in a thread I hadn't seen yet. At first, I thought it was fake. Lauren was being sued by her former friend, no, former business partner, for embezzlement. Apparently, Lauren had convinced the friend's family to invest in her new wellness platform, promising to manage brand deals, vendors, and distribution. Except the money never made it past Lauren's account. $10,000 gone. No receipts. No deliverables. Just Instagram posts and influencer photo shoots that suddenly vanished. At first, I felt detached. Almost numb. Like I had seen this movie before. Another crash and burn chapter in Lauren's saga. But then came the phone calls. First Mom. Sweetie, Lauren's going through a really hard time, and we need to come together. Then Dad. You've got the financial know-how. You can help her fix this. Maybe help cover the legal fees, just to buy her some time. That's when it hit me. They weren't just asking me to support. They were expecting me to sacrifice. Again. But this wasn't a car repair or a one-time loan. This was a federal offense. This was jail time. This was Lauren dragging the family into national embarrassment because she thought she could play entrepreneur with someone else's money. Still, I asked for details. I read the lawsuit. I even asked Lauren to send me a copy of her statements. She never did. She sent crying emojis. She blamed the friend. They're jealous, she said. They never liked me shining. This is their revenge. My father ate it up like gospel. Your sister's hurting, he told me, voice stern. You will help. And I think that was the moment. The moment I snapped, not out loud, not in front of them, but inside. Like something calcified in my chest. I looked at my own savings. The account I'd built dollar by dollar. The down payment for my first home. The security I had earned with every overtime shift and missed vacation. And I thought, would they do the same for me? If I were sued, if I were publicly humiliated, would they empty their accounts for me? No. They wouldn't even come to the courthouse. I didn't sleep that night. I kept pacing, going through old memories, old scars. Times I had missed out because Lauren needed the spotlight. Times I had stayed silent while she bulldozed over people. The lies she told. The chaos she left. And the family that always cleaned it up, mostly with my money, my time, my guilt. So when Dad invited me to dinner, to talk things over, I already knew it wasn't a conversation. It was a command. You know what happened there. The plate. The shouting. The guilt parade. But what mattered was what happened after. For the first time in my life, I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I didn't lower my voice and say I'd think about it. I stood up. I said no. And I walked out. I was done being the backup plan for a family that only remembered I existed when they needed saving. I was done being the responsible one, who bled quietly while everyone else lived loud and reckless. I wasn't their foundation anymore. They could watch their empire of excuses crumble without me. After I walked out of that dinner, I expected silence. Maybe a few angry texts. Maybe a guilt-ridden voicemail from Mom. What I didn't expect was a full-on family intervention 2 days later. They showed up at my apartment unannounced, Dad, Mom, and Lauren, carrying takeout like peace offerings. But their eyes gave them away. It wasn't peace they were after. It was compliance. Dad barely let me close the door before he started pacing. We just need a plan, he said, already assuming I'd agreed to help. Something to buy her some time. You've got contacts. You can talk to someone, figure out a settlement strategy, maybe loan her. I'm not loaning anything. I interrupted, my voice flat. I'm not getting involved. Lauren sniffled loudly, dramatically. She was wearing one of those full vulnerable hoodies influencers put on when doing apology videos. I made a mistake, okay? But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just got caught up in it. You don't know how much pressure I'm under. You took money, I said sharply. From people who trusted you. I was going to pay it back. She shot back. God, why are you always acting like you're better than me? I looked at her, then at my parents, who had gone eerily quiet. Their silence said everything. They weren't going to hold her accountable. They never had. And that's when I realized I was never going to get through to them. Logic didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. They had rewritten reality so many times that Lauren's messes were just unfortunate accidents. And I was the villain for not forgiving her. So I stopped talking. I let them rant, accuse, cry, plead, until they finally left. But I wasn't done. Not this time. I'd spent my life walking on eggshells for these people. But now, I was done playing the good kid. I was going to protect myself. And if that meant exposing the truth, so be it. That night, I started gathering everything I had. Screenshots. Emails. Texts Lauren had sent me over the years bragging about bending the truth to make a sale, manipulating followers, forging invoices to get early brand payments. She had always thought it was harmless. That's how the industry works. She'd laugh. But it wasn't harmless. It was calculated. And now it was catching up to her. I reached out to someone I trusted, an old friend from college who worked in legal compliance. I didn't tell him everything at first, just hypothetical questions. But when he heard some of the details, his tone changed. You need to protect yourself, he said. If they're going to tie your name to this, financially or publicly, you need a paper trail that says you said no. And that's what I built. A wall of proof. I documented my refusals, my lack of involvement. I sent emails declining to participate. I had records of my finances, showing I hadn't transferred anything to Lauren or co-signed anything. If she or my parents tried to drag me down with her, they'd find themselves face to face with timestamps and receipts. Then, the media got wind of it. One of the influencers Lauren had burned, someone with a much larger following, posted a video. It went viral. Suddenly, it wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a public scandal. Lauren's name was trending again. This time, not with envy but rage. Former collaborators began to come forward. Stories of unpaid partnerships, ghosted vendors, fraudulent DMs. The wellness brand she claimed to launch was exposed as a facade. Everything unraveled. My phone exploded. Family, friends, coworkers, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Some asked if I was okay. Some assumed I was helping her. A few warned me that Lauren had started telling people I was her business manager during that time, implying I was involved. That's when I knew it was war. I sent out a public statement, brief, professional. I wasn't involved. I had no business ties to her brand. I sympathized with anyone affected, and I trusted the legal process. I made it clear that I had documents to prove my distance. No drama. Just facts. Lauren went ballistic. She called me crying, screaming, begging. How could you throw me under the bus like that? She shouted. You're making me look guilty. You did that yourself, I said coldly. And you tried to drag me with you. Dad texted me an hour later. You've humiliated your family. Your sister is being torn apart online. Hope you're proud. I didn't respond. Because for once, I was proud. Proud that I stood up. Proud that I stopped cleaning up other people's messes. Proud that I finally said enough. The next few weeks were brutal. Lauren's legal team reached out, likely under pressure from my parents, to clarify some things. I referred them to my lawyer. I wasn't getting caught in their net. Meanwhile, something strange started happening. People started reaching out to me, not just with questions, but with thanks. Other family members who'd been mistreated by Lauren. Former classmates she bullied. Quiet voices that had always been too afraid to speak up. They weren't celebrating her downfall, but they were relieved. Finally, someone had said what they'd all felt. I wasn't the villain. I was the mirror. And Lauren hated mirrors. A month later, I heard through a cousin that she'd been offered a plea deal. Reduced charges in exchange for restitution and a public admission of wrongdoing. My parents tried to spin it as a victory. She's being so brave, Mom said. Taking responsibility like that. I didn't reply. I was already focused on something else. Freedom. Real freedom. Emotional freedom. Financial freedom. The kind that comes when you cut ties with people who only love the version of you they can control. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I started saying no more often. I turned down invitations to family dinners that came with hidden expectations. I stopped answering calls from people who only reached out when they wanted something. I reclaimed my time, my money, my energy. And I started building something just for me. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Lauren's scandal eventually faded from the headlines, but not from memory. She lost sponsors, credibility, and some of her friends. But she didn't lose my parents. They stuck by her, even as she quietly moved back into their guest room. They still talk about her like she's on the verge of a comeback. Maybe she is. But I won't be part of it. Because this time, I brought receipts. And I'm not cleaning up anyone's mess again. There was no explosion when it ended. No final confrontation, no shouting match, no dramatic door slam. The end came in silence. In me no longer answering. In them no longer asking. Lauren pled guilty. That part made local news but not the national circuits. She struck a deal: probation, restitution payments, mandatory community service. She issued a generic public apology through a PR firm. There was no mention of the victims by name, no tears, no real remorse. Just a caption under a photo of her in beige, looking solemn in an oversized blazer. I've grown, and I'm ready to rebuild. My parents reposted it proudly. We always knew she was strong. Mom wrote, like Lauren had survived a natural disaster instead of orchestrating one. I didn't like it, but I didn't comment. I didn't call. I didn't even watch the full apology video. I was done feeding attention into a system that only cared when someone was on the verge of breaking. Instead, I focused on rebuilding something of my own: boundaries. The first time I declined to visit for a holiday, I got 4 missed calls. The 5th was a text from my dad that said, "Guess some people only show up when it's convenient." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. No reply. Not because I was angry. Because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. They had made their choices, and now I was making mine. The silence stretched for weeks. Then months. Lauren didn't try to contact me. I suspect she was told not to, maybe by her attorney, maybe by a crisis manager. My parents alternated between passive-aggressive texts and sudden bursts of "just checking in" messages. I responded politely but distantly. When they asked if I would join them for Lauren's birthday dinner, her first step back into the world, I said I had other plans. I didn't. But they didn't need to know that. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even about proving anything anymore. It was about peace. And peace, I've learned, is active. It's not just absence of noise. It's choosing what to let into your life. What to protect. What to let go. People talk a lot about breaking cycles. They make it sound heroic, like a grand gesture. But it's not. Breaking a cycle is refusing to reply to that manipulative text. It's walking away from a dinner where no one sees you. It's saying no without apology. It's the small, quiet choices that build a new life. One where you're not the fixer. Not the fallback plan. Not the emotionally discounted therapist to a family that only knocks when they're bleeding. A few months after Lauren's plea deal, I got a letter from one of her victims. A woman named Haley. She'd lost nearly $6,000 in the fake brand partnership Lauren pitched. She'd been just starting out, hoping the exposure would lead to more clients. Instead, she got burned and blamed herself. She wrote, "I saw your statement. It gave me clarity I didn't even know I needed. Thank you for not pretending everything was fine." I cried when I read it. Because for the first time, I felt seen. Not by my family. Not by the people who thought they owned me. But by someone who recognized the cost of truth. I've learned that truth has a price. Sometimes you pay it in loneliness. Sometimes in distance. Sometimes in the deep ache of no longer being who they want you to be. But the reward? It's clean air. No guilt trips arriving in your inbox. No expectations hidden behind fake family dinners. No more apologizing for being the only one who tried to live honestly. I bought a condo last spring. My name on the deed, my savings in the foundation. No co-signers. No strings. It's not big. But it's mine. The walls are quiet. The fridge hums. The neighbors mind their business. And some mornings, I wake up to the sound of nothing, and I smile. I built this. Not out of spite. Out of choice. I still see my parents sometimes. Mostly at wider family gatherings, weddings, birthdays, funerals. We talk like distant acquaintances. They still ask how I am, still pretend like nothing changed. I let them. I don't bring up Lauren, and they don't ask if I will make amends. Because we all know I already did. Just not in the way they wanted. The last time I saw Lauren was at a cousin's wedding. She was quieter than usual, more reserved. No loud entrance, no dramatic speeches. Just a polite smile and a nod across the room. We didn't speak. She looked like someone who had finally realized not every bridge is worth rebuilding. I looked like someone who had finally crossed mine and kept walking. There's a strange kind of grief that comes when you let go of people who are still alive. It's not loud. It doesn't come with tears. It comes in waves, soft then sharp. Like passing by a house you used to live in and realizing someone else is inside now. You remember the good. You mourn what never was. Then you keep going. Because forward is the only honest direction. I'm not angry anymore. Not at Lauren. Not even at my parents. I see them for what they are, flawed people who clung to a narrative because it was easier than facing the truth. They didn't know how to love fairly. But I know how to love myself now. And that's enough. I still get tempted sometimes. When I see a photo of the four of them smiling, pretending nothing ever happened. Part of me aches. The child in me still wants to be invited, included, believed. But the adult in me remembers what it cost. And she's not paying it again. Because healing isn't about being welcomed back into the fire. It's about realizing you never owed them your burning. So now I live. I work. I travel. I laugh harder than I ever did in that house. I send birthday cards to the cousins who reached out. I make dinner with friends who listen without agendas. I build a life that's mine. And when people ask about my family, I say, it's complicated. Then I smile. Because what they don't know is, I survived them. And I'm finally free. There's a myth we rarely question, that strength means silence. That to be the reliable one. The stable one. The good one, you must carry everyone else's weight without complaint. You must absorb the damage, smooth the edges, and keep showing up. And maybe, for a long time, that was true for me. But the truth is, that kind of strength isn't noble. It's exhausting. And eventually it breaks you. This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about clarity. About recognizing the quiet erosion of self that happens when you're constantly expected to clean up other people's messes just because you can. It's about the slow realization that not all loyalty is love, and that not every family system is fair. One of the hardest lessons I learned was this: you can love people and still choose to protect yourself from them. For years, I thought setting boundaries was selfish. That walking away meant I had failed as a daughter, a sibling, a human being. But the reality is, sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to stop enabling them. To let them face the consequences they've spent a lifetime avoiding. Lauren wasn't just irresponsible. She was protected by a family that taught her she'd always be rescued. That someone would always step in to shield her from accountability. And for years, that someone was me. But when I stopped playing that role, something unexpected happened. I started to heal. Healing didn't look like a perfect new family or a dramatic reconciliation. It looked like silence. Stillness. Mornings where I didn't wake up with dread. Days where I could breathe without waiting for the next demand. It looked like sitting alone and realizing I was okay. That I had my own back. The lesson? Peace doesn't always come from resolution. Sometimes it comes from refusal. Refusing to carry what isn't yours. Refusing to accept gaslighting as guidance. Refusing to keep proving your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. Another lesson: people will call you cruel for choosing boundaries over self-sacrifice. Especially if you've been the dependable one your whole life. They won't recognize your no as survival, they'll call it betrayal. Let them. That's not your burden to carry anymore. You're not cruel for not setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. You're not cold for choosing peace over proximity. And you're not selfish for walking away from a table where you've only ever been served guilt. This story also taught me the power of documentation, of keeping receipts, literally and metaphorically. Not to weaponize, but to protect. In a world that often rewards charm over truth, it's important to keep track of your own story. To have proof when others try to rewrite it. Your voice matters. Your memory matters. And your truth? It's not optional. It's essential. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this. You don't need their apology to heal. And you don't need their permission to move on. So many people stay stuck because they're waiting for a moment that may never come, the moment the family finally sees them, thanks them, validates them. But healing doesn't depend on someone else's realization. It begins the moment you decide you're done living small to make others comfortable. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the scene of the crime. It means freeing yourself from the need to rewrite the past. I forgave my family in my own way. Not with words, but with distance. I stopped needing them to be different. I stopped needing them to understand. I just needed them to let go, and when they wouldn't, I let go instead. So if you're reading this and you've been the strong one, the quiet one, the forgotten backbone of someone else's chaos, I want you to hear this. You are not wrong for wanting peace. You are not difficult for asking to be treated fairly. And you are not alone in feeling like love shouldn't cost your sanity. Walk away if you have to. Stay gone if you must. And when the guilt creeps in, because it will, remind yourself, it's not your job to fix what they refuse to admit is broken. It's your job to protect the one person who's been there for you all along. You.